There is an incorrect and frankly dangerous teaching that has made its way throughout Western Buddhism, which I would like to put to rest today. And that is the teaching of no self. And the teaching goes something like this. Everything in life is an illusion, including ourselves. Therefore, nothing in life exists, including ourself. And if there is no self, there is no problem with anything. And this sounds good in theory. However, it becomes very incoherent and very dangerous very quickly when we try to enact this in daily life. Now, we sometimes see this play out in Buddhist forums. Someone perhaps has a family member who has died and they reach out to the Sangha looking for comfort. And some edgelord will jump into the comments and say, there is no self to die. Or maybe someone is abusive towards another member of the Sangha and they'll try and defend their actions by saying, who is it that I harmed through my actions? And of course, this is just a not nice thing to do, but it's also completely incoherent if we look at the Buddha and how he lived his life. If there is no self, if nothing exists, why on earth would Buddha leave the palace? Why would he sit under the Bodhi tree to realize enlightenment? Why would he teach the Dharma for 45 years until his death? Now, when I ask this question, I'm usually told, well, he did it out of compassion. Compassion for who? You just told me there's no one here. So clearly, the idea that Buddhism teaches there is no self is wrong. Of course, this begs the question, what does Buddhism actually teach? And the answer is that Buddhism teaches not self or non-self. And that might seem like a very slight change, but the difference is very important for us to understand. Now, to get to the root of the matter, first, I would like to make a reading from the Lalita Vistara Sutra, which I think sheds some light on this. Here's the sutra, if you'd like to get a copy for yourself. And the reading goes like this. Every constituent part of existence is established by one thing depending on another. Each becomes established by another, where one begins and ends, and how long it lasts can nowhere be seen. When there is a seed, there is a sprout. But the seed is not the sprout. It is not something else, though it is not the same thing either, and so there is no permanence or ending. Composite factors are derived from ignorance. Even the factors do not exist in reality. Composites and ignorance are both empty by nature. They are motionless and non-interacting. By means of the seal, the impression appears. Did the seal shift to the impression or did it not? It is not the same, yet it is not from something else. Thus are all composites impermanent, and yet they are not destroyed. I'm going to read that last line again because it's extremely important. Thus are all composites impermanent, and yet they are not destroyed. So what are we being told in this passage? Well, we are being told that life is indeed an illusion. However, not in the way that we might think of an illusion in the West. For us, if something is illusory, that means it's not real. It doesn't exist. However, from the Buddhist perspective, and by extension, Eastern philosophy in general, for something to be real, it must be permanent and separately abiding. Its existence cannot depend on anything else. So, from this perspective, nothing in our reality is real because everything we experience in daily life exists dependently originated on other things. The floor is made out of wood that came from trees. My robes are made out of cotton that came from plants that were nurtured by the soil. Everything is dependently originated on everything else, therefore nothing exists in and by itself. It is an illusion, yes, but it is still very much real. It does exist. The ignorance referred to in the scripture refers to the mental imputations we place on the world in order to understand it. Naturally, we as human beings cannot make sense of the entire universe, so we chop it up into pieces so that we can more readily understand. There's a floor, there's a ceiling, there's a desk, there's a light, or there's an altar. These things aren't real in the sense that they are made up by our minds, but they most certainly exist, and because they exist, they have value. To put it a different way, we can think of ourselves in relation to our family. I exist because of a union between my mother and my father. As a result, aspects of both of them are in me. I grew up being told that I look just like my mom, that I act just like my dad. You may have been told you look just like your aunt did at your age. Something to that effect. Why? Because we are dependently originated. We exist based on the interaction of our family members. The Buddhist teaching of non-self or not self is not a commentary that says we don't exist. It's simply a commentary on the nature of our existence. And we take that understanding that I exist due to a union between my mother and my father, and as Buddhists, we expand it to the entire universe. It wasn't just my mother and father that made me, it was also the sun that shines down on me every day. It was the food that gives me nourishment. It's the air I breathe, the grass I walk on outside. All of these things are us. It's not that we don't exist. It's not that there is no self. It's just that the self exists as an aggregate of other things. And if we understand the self in this way, suddenly Buddhism makes a lot of sense. Now it's perfectly coherent. It's life-affirming and life-sustaining. Because in the same way that I take care of my hands because I understand they are a part of myself, if I understand that the grass and the trees and the air and the sun are also a part of me, then I also care for them because I understand that caring for the outside world is one of the most effective ways to care for the inner world. So, I want to be very clear. The teaching of no self is entirely incorrect. It's not supported by Buddhist doctrine. However, the teaching of non-self or not self, that's what the Buddha taught. He taught that we are an aggregate of other things. That our existence, that our happiness, that our enlightenment is dependent on the objects and beings and things around us. Because we cannot exist without those things. So by caring for those things, we care for ourselves, and by extension, by caring for ourselves, we care for all sentient beings. So when we engage in our Buddhist practice, when we sit on the cushion, when we chant, when we bow, when we study sutras, yes, we are working towards our own enlightenment, but we are also working towards the enlightenment of all sentient beings. When we care for ourselves, we care for everyone. Amitabha.